More in a shelter on Long Island, Nico has been forced to make a decision much too traumatic for any 14-year-old return to Guatemala and risk death, or stay in the U.S. to pursue relief and potentially never see his parents again. After crossing the border a few months ago, he was separated from his father, who was then deported in mid-July. Nico, whose name has been changed because he is underage, is now left to make an impossible choice without any parental guidance. When Alexander Holtzman, an attorney at the Safe Passage Project, talks to his client about his future, the 14-year-old looks at the ground while tears well in his eyes. After discovering his father had been deported, Nico drew stick figures of his parents and himself standing under rain clouds on opposite sides of the page. Holtzman said, "I think the decision was hard for him to make," said Holtzman. He's a 14-year-old kid trying to make a very adult decision about what his future will be, and trying to navigate a complex legal system that doesn't have his or his father's best interest at heart. Like Nico, most of the 559 children who are still separated from their parents, the majority of whom have been deported, will also be forced into this decision. They will need to choose between seeking safety in the U.S. or reuniting with their mother and fathers back home in potentially life-threatening situations. Though many parents say immigration and customs enforcement officers coerce them into signing deportation forms, the government has no plans to allow them back into America to seek due process. Lawyers and advocates are now scrambling to locate deported parents in Central America to ask if they want their children to stay in the U.S. or return home. But because of inadequate government contact information, these parents have been extremely difficult to find. And so many children who expected to seek relief alongside their families will have to make a colossal decision about their future by themselves. Priya Konings, the interim managing attorney at Kids in Need of Defense said it's difficult to help kids make such high-stakes choices. She and other lawyers have been forced to ask children who can barely read questions such as, do you want to go back to your home country where you expressed a fear of return? Do you want to stay here and be in long-term foster care? Do you want to try and find a relative you've never even met yet and live with them? These are terrible questions to ask kids, she said. And it's really putting them between a rock and hard place. Konings said children want to be with their parents and are scared to live in foster care or with unknown relatives, but many also fear returning to their home countries. Kavya Viswanathan, an attorney at The Door, a legal services provider in New York, said it's an almost impossible decision to make. I mean, it's like a Sophie's choice, Viswanathan said, referencing the film in which a Polish mother has to choose which of her two children will die in a Nazi concentration camp. You're choosing a life free from harm in the U.S., but that option means you're not going to be with your parent. If you choose to reunify with your parent, there's just no guarantee. You might be deported to a place where you believe your life is in danger. Many kids who cross the border with their parents fled incredibly dangerous situations. In countries that make up Central America's Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras and El Salvador, crimes such as gang and domestic violence are rife and police offer little if any protection. Konings said that for kids who are recruited by gang members there are two options: join or die. Immigration lawyer Hope Fry said she recently met a 6-year-old girl from Honduras whose wrists were burned by members of a gang her uncle refused to join. An immigrant family in the U.S. told her about a 5-year-old Honduran girl who was shot by gangs in their neighborhood in front of her 3-year-old sister. While older kids might recognize the danger of returning home, younger ones often don't fully understand or know the horrific details of why they fled. Lawyers say small children are so traumatized from the being forcibly separated from their mothers and fathers that all they can do is cry and ask to see their families again. Maybe a teenager can tell you what happened back home and form an asylum claim, said Amelie Silverstein, an immigration attorney at Catholic Charities. But kids this small cannot. The administration really created this problem. Further traumatizing kids is not what our system should be about. Guli Stampour, the deputy executive director of the Safe Passage Project, one of her cases involved a 7-year-old with cerebral palsy who was separated from her father at the border and could barely speak. She answered Silverstein's questions, "Do you want to stay here? Do you want to go home to Guatemala?" by shaking her head yes.